Philly already hired Dame Lillard's trainer earlier this week in what could be a move to help welcome a Lillard-Simmons trade. And this morning, Dame just told reporters that the Blazers did not have the free agency he would have liked. There are also reports that Simmons has cut off communication with Philly as any chatter is being directed to his agent, Rich Paul. On top of that, Simmons' dynamic with Joel Embiid has been deemed beyond repair. Yikes. Chris Broussard, how does this play out in Philly?
Well, it seems like it's coming together for the perfect trade, right? I mean, they want Damian Lillard in Philly. Portland could start all over. They have a new coach in Chauncey Billups. You build around Ben Simmons. I mean, that's how this should end out. But it will take Damian Lillard going to the Portland Trail Blazers and saying, look, I want to be moved, and I want you to move me to Philadelphia. And I think the Blazers would work with Dame. Now, they're going to do what's best for them at the end of the day, as is Philadelphia. But I think it'd be a nice move for Portland. They're not going anywhere as they are currently constructed. They lost last year to Denver while Jamal Murray was hurt for the Nuggets. That same Nuggets team got swept by the Phoenix Suns. All right, so Dame threw out a few weeks ago, he threw out a scenario, a challenge to the Blazers that was impossible to make. He said, we got to see what we do in the offseason. Let's improve our team. Everybody knew they couldn't. They couldn't improve their team. He comes out today and says, we didn't do what, we had hoped to do. Well, you did what we figured you'd do. They were what we thought they were, all right? And so it was like Dame was putting something out there that they couldn't reach. I don't know if he knew that or not, but certainly people that follow the league closely knew they weren't going to be able to make a splash in free agency. It seems like because Dame has been so strong and adamant about being loyal to Portland, so strong and adamant in his opposition to super teams, that he doesn't want to move, that he doesn't want to be the guy to say, you know what, I need to go here to win a championship. And so, but look, nobody's going to hold that against you. We just said it. LeBron hasn't won it without a second superstar. KD hasn't won it without a second superstar. And a third in Klay Thompson, I would say. So nobody's going to hold this against Dame. And Philadelphia is the perfect place. They need leadership in the locker room. He gives that. They need a great point guard and shooter. He gives that. He's a perfect mix with Joel Embiid. It fits perfectly. And I know Ben Simmons doesn't want to go to Portland. That's the word out. So what? All right? You're not controlling this situation, especially when you're not going to behave professionally. If Ben Simmons wants to work with them on a trade, then work with them. But if you're going to ignore our calls if these reports are true and not answer our texts and ghost us, and we're supposed to trade you where you want to go, I'll trade you where you want to go if it benefits us. But ultimately, we're going to do what's best for us if we're Philadelphia, and especially if you're not going to be professional and work with us, because Ben is hurting his trade value right now. He's got good trade. Look, I've talked to people in the league that don't want to touch him. I don't want somebody that's scared to shoot. I've talked to more people in the league that really like him, that would love, that think you can build a team around him, kind of like Milwaukee built around Giannis with shooters, even though he's not as good and aggressive as Giannis. All right, so he's got value, but when you act unprofessionally like this and you won't even talk to the team that's paying you all this money, that's not a good look. So he's cutting his trade value right now, but I think a perfect trade would be him for Damian Lillard and whatever else it takes to make it happen, and you put Lillard in Philly and Ben in Portland.
I mean, it may sound a little redundant because, I mean, quite frankly, there isn't a lot of meat on the bone of this conversation. It is a Joel Embiid team. Like, that isn't up for question. Let's start there, because when you start there and understanding that Joel is the priority of what's taking place here, then now you're able to figure out the Ben Simmons situation. Ben ultimately, the organization ultimately, and the rest of the league ultimately understands that Ben Simmons is expendable at this point as a player as a commodity for the Philadelphia 76ers. So now understanding that, how do you play your cards? It has now become a slim free agency pool of players to go after. Dame Lillard does fit the bill to be a tremendous addition. I made mention of the fact he has an AI-like personality persona. You know, they're into kind of the same things, the influence of it, the way he's gritty and tough and just has a certain demeanor about him that fits Philly-style basketball. So he would be a tremendous addition to this team. They added his trainer. That was a strategic move in itself. Sometimes there are things that you can't understand how and why they happen the way that they do. But I just wonder, in looking at Joel Embiid and establishing that it's going to be what's best for Joel Embiid to be the best player he can be for the Sixers, you look at it as it being a match made in heaven. You look at the skills and what Dame Lillard brings to the table. But then I started thinking to myself, could there be a conflict? And not a conflict in terms of how it would look or how it would play out on the basketball court. I kind of came to the conflict conversation point because doesn't it seem like there's a parallel connected to Joel Embiid and player relations? I mean, I start thinking about the Andre Drummond trade. What's the first thing we're discussing about it? The beef, can the beef be settled between Andre and Joel Embiid? Now we're talking about the Ben Simmons situation. Let me tell you something. If one of my teammates didn't answer my call when we're calling, if there's one person that you can talk to in situations like these, it's your teammates. When I was having contract situations and things were falling apart with what was going on with me in Washington, I was on the phone with my homeboys. I was on the phone with my teammates. You know what we were doing? We were colluding. You know why we were colluding? Because that's how it's supposed to be. How do we make this work? I actually leveraged the team to put in a CBA deal running out. Hey, put the contracts that you're doing. If the CBA runs out, you got to get under the cap, which this may be not understandable, but just bear with me. I had them guarantee the contracts of my defensive teammates before I would do the deal to restructure my deal so that everything fit in proper perspective for the salary cap. They didn't do it. We ended up going a different direction. But the point of the story is you would never sell out your teammate if the relationship is strong with your teammate. So this is a deteriorated situation, and it makes me wonder, is Joel Embiid the one that has to take a look in the mirror and say, people don't want to play in the sandbox with you? Like, we're going to bring Dame Lillard's, trainer here. We're going to do this, and we're going to try to make concessions to try to make this a soft landing in a more appealing situation. But us as players, we know one another. And we know what we think about one another, how we interact with one another. You'd be like, oh, dude is weird, or this dude is a bum, or, oh, he's a G, that's an OG, that's a triple OG. You know who's who by now.
Yeah.
I wonder, is this a situation that's brewing where we think that it's the best situation for Dame Lillard? But the type of dude Dame Lillard is, he seemed like an OG to me. Yeah. I don't know that he goes in there and deals with some of this stuff that I feel like this is the reason why Embiid has issues with his teammates. Why do you have a situation where Simmons isn't answering your calls? So to me, I get a little bit skeptical now as to if Dame Lillard is a great fit for this team. And quite frankly, we talked about Luka and who's going to play with Luka. He's ball dominant. You know who's ball dominant? Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid is ball dominant. Yeah. And what's interesting about that is,
he's not.
Of course he is ball dominant.
Yeah, he's a ball.
He is ball dominant. And here's the thing. Here's the thing about Joel Embiid. He just seems to have that type of personality where it's possible he could rub you the wrong way. Now, I'm just basing that off of what I see and what I hear and what I read. I don't know the man, so I'm not going to make a personal assumption on him and attack. But I just wonder if it begs to have the discussion of, is it the proper place to go play as long as Joel Embiid is the main focal point of the team?
Well, two things to back up LeVar. He did get into it with Shake Milton last year. Remember, there was like a towel thrown in somebody's face on the bench. And after the Game 7 loss to the Hawks, Embiid made some comments about Simmons that were not great. I think I read somewhere that Ben Simmons has not been back to Philadelphia since that series loss. Apparently, there were a lot of threats from fans, and he doesn't feel comfortable there. Ben Simmons wants out clearly. He wants to go to a warmer climate. He would love to go to Golden State. This is a guy who grew up in Australia, down under. And, but he doesn't want to be in Portland, as Chris said. Reading these Dame Lillard quotes, which just broke within the last hour,